Okay, so I want to go way back to Betsy, was it Betsy Vondell? At the Vondell at Lake Maury Stables. And I think a lot about how we ended up with Midnight and that truck, but I don't remember exactly how we ended up with Midnight and that truck, though we all love Midnight.
I do.
Okay, well, let's hear it.
Midnight belonged to one of the camps on Lake Maury. And in the wintertime, they didn't want to keep these horses.
Right.
And Judy Bogdanovich worked there.
Yep.
And through her, they said, they knew us maybe through her. And she came and said, would you like another horse? You shouldn't have one, you gotta have two. So I can remember her saying, yeah, we'll keep a horse. Yeah, it's great. We just feed it and shovel after it. But that's the way it'll be.
But I thought we bought Midnight and the truck for $50.
Well,
60.
No,
60?
it was 2 years. The
Okay.
first winter we had just Midnight.
Uh-huh.
And the second year, Midnight went back to the camp. At the end of that camp year, Judy was leaving, and they were the stables were closing down, they were going to tear it down, because they built a town EMT place for the ambulances, and Upper Valley Ambulance was out of there. And she left, and she said, to tell you, and I said, we needed a vehicle. We didn't have a trailer. And how about the horse truck? Well, it wasn't really a horse truck. It was a cattle truck.
Cattle truck. Uncovered cattle truck.
Uncovered, no top. It had a big box hanging out over the front of it. And I think it was about a 1950 something, 51, 52 Chevrolet.
I remember that truck.
And it was a little rusty, but it ran. But it had a huge, heavy barn door gate.
The ramp was, it was huge. It was so heavy, and it was a big step up. So the horses had to step this high, practically, to get up on the
It
ramp.
was that high.
So you remember $60 for Midnight and the truck? So.
And a saddle.
That's right, and a saddle. We got the saddle thrown in. And then Mom would drive us to Pony Club, but none of our horses would load in the truck. So we would spend hours in the morning trying to load them. And then we'd get to Pony Club and ride, and then they wouldn't load going home. Do you remember Sonny? We must have, this man, Boothstill, had helped us load Sonny. It took us like 2.5 hours. It was ridiculous.
He had a staple for fencing. And I didn't know what he had the first time. He came up behind Sonny, he went right out with the other staple, and Sonny leapt out of the truck.
But Mom, you have to tell the story. So Mom, I was 10 years old. Tracy was 12. We were little. And so Mom would leave Lyme. It would take an hour to get to Woodstock in that truck.
Yeah, at least.
And then you got to ride back, maybe with the Smiths or somebody, left the truck, would come back over to get us at the end of Pony Club. So I remember this because I was in the front with you. We were driving home on, was it 89?
No, 4. 89 wasn't open then.
Wasn't built yet.
When did you get stopped, though? What road were you stopped?
I was on the highway.
Right, 90. So it was 91.
Yeah, 91.
And we're driving along, and these blue lights came on. And then you tell the story, because it was about you.
Well, I was driving this truck full of kids and horses, and it was all quite illegal. And I think Tracy and
We're in the back.
that were in the back with the horses, which they shouldn't have been, but they were.
And they survived.
Luckily, these were lovely, quite friendly horses and not easily rattled. So this policeman pulled me over, and I didn't know what I could have been doing wrong. And he said I wasn't going the speed limit. I was going less. I think it was 40 something.
Yeah, we were going up a hill and the speed limit
We just barely made it.
was 40 and we were going like 30. And he said, you have to get off the highway because you're driving too slowly. But we were in the between two exits. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was like, okay, thanks. Now you've stopped us going up a hill. Yeah. And then we just kept going on the highway.
Yeah, so we kept going, and then something happened to the truck, and I think maybe it was a flat tire, but here I was with all these kids and all these horses, and I was able to roll down an exit and into it wasn't just a gas station, but it was where they did some
Right, like service station.
And they took one look at me and the truck and the horses and all and said, you just got to get out of here, lady. I can't cope with you. And I didn't know what to do, but I called I think it was where we had bought some cars. What was it?
Patch.
Patch.
Patches?
Yeah.
Patch Ford.
Flanders and Patch.
Flanders and Patch, yeah.
And luckily they knew us and they had done some work for us and they were very nice. They came and I guess they just changed a tire.
We didn't have to unload the horses.
No, we didn't have to do that, which was good because that would have been quite a disaster.
Well, that's another story because we took the Mengies horses to Pony Club and one of our horses started beating up one of the Mengies horses, and on 89 we stopped in one of those turnaround, not the do not turn places. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. And we had to unload them, and then Sonny wouldn't freaking load. The cops come and they're like, "You can't be here." We're like, "Then help us." You remember?
Yeah.
But he didn't help. He just watched.
Yeah.
But
he didn't help, but he realized that it was impossible to
their horse had blood running down its face. I mean, whatever horse, I don't remember who it was who was so mean, but their horse was really getting beaten up, so we had to move the horses. But we are in the middle, I don't know what those are called, but I guess they're police turnarounds. And the guy's like, "You've got to leave." And we were like, "We have no option. Like, can you help us?" And he didn't, but Sonny did load finally, I think.
Yeah. And we finally got home, but that was probably the worst trip that we had of many trips that were colorful.
Hair raising.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about this truck, and we lived by Bill and Martha Clark. And several times Bill borrowed the truck, which was a big mistake.
Jeez.
The most inept farmer that ever lived, most wonderful man. And he was driving some little calves to beef to an auction in Lebanon. And he went under by Alice Paget Hospital. He turned off Mechanic Street to get back to where this auction was. And there was a crunch. The box and the stuff out in the front, the bridge was too low, and he mangled the front of the...
He just went right into it. It was not good. So the sad thing was, though, that truck took, well, there were 3 standing stalls, and then we could put 1 or 2 across the back. They called it a 5-horse, but it was 4. So then that truck died. It was ancient, and it didn't go very fast. So then we got a moving van. Dad bought a moving van and made a 6-horse van, built beautiful stalls, but there were 2 really big minuses. One was the
Dad
floor.
built the stalls.
No, I know the stalls were great, but the floor was so slippery. Do you remember that? That was tough. And then the other thing was the ramp couldn't come out right where it needed to be because of the axle. So we had a ramp that weighed what, 250 pounds?
No,
200? I don't know.
A lot.
I would say, I built the ramp,
It was aluminum.
aluminum rack, and I could lift it up and drag it.
I did it alone a couple times.
But it took two to really lift it up and put the hooks on. And it had side doors. That's why we bought a moving van. It had side doors for loading. And we had that truck for 50
And you guys
years.
rode in that truck because wasn't that truck still going caroling when you were little, maybe?
Yeah, went right up.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Well, at the end we were caroling in Hanover transfer truck.
That's right.
At the end. So maybe you guys weren't in that one.
Maybe not.
But that
They had
truck,
6 horses?
it would take 6 in a stall. 6 stalls. There were 3 stalls in the front, 3 in the back.
They're facing each other.
And then there was an opening where we
Yeah.
actually did sometimes
Covered,
put a pony or a
pony or
horse.
two in there.
And it was huge. And Mom drove that back and forth with 5 or 6 horses in it and all these little kids. And then Mom would jump out. She was like 2 and 100 pounds. And people were very nice though. When we pulled into Pony Club, they would know we couldn't do the ramp. And everybody would come over and help us. Because it was heavy. And it was awkward. I mean, it was,
It was more awkward than heavy.
yeah.
But Grandma drove that truck to Toronto.
Yeah?
She drove it to Kentucky,
Yeah.
Virginia, Pennsylvania. She
We
drove
went to Canada once.
Yeah, and we went to, do you remember when we went to Maine to get the spiral staircase in their new house? No, is it the little house or the new house?
The new house, the
The
wood
new,
one.
the spiral staircase. Mom and I drove that up. So we were driving it up.
With a horse in it
We
going
took
up.
a horse up, my horse. We dropped Banjo off. I sold him up there. Picked up the spiral staircase on the way back, but in a, what's it called, toll plaza. Do you remember what happened? We had a brake lock.
Oh,
We
yeah,
were,
an airlock,
what is it called?
an airlock.
An airlock. So we
Oh,
were
yeah.
driving, and you were actually driving, and suddenly we're stuck in this toll plaza in this old truck. Oh my God. You were so mad.
It wasn't the brakes that locked. The airlock stopped the engine, and the engine was hot. We had those airlocks on and off the last 3 or 4 years we owned it.
Yeah.
And one year we delivered, we delivered your mother's stuff. We picked up everything she moved in Boston, but it wasn't ready, her condo wasn't ready. So we took the stalls out, we were using it as a moving van,
Yep.
and we parked, we went out to Colorado's and parked the truck opposite where all their barns are. And it sat there for about 4 or 5 months. And we gave the apartment right, we came down to move it. And it was low on gas. And we drove to a Sunoco station, I'll never forget it, about 2 miles.
Yeah.
And we stopped. And I looked back at the truck. And to get rid of pee, I had drilled about 1-inch holes all over the area where the horses would pee to drain it out of the truck. And we looked back, and here are mice, just one after another, mice running out of the truck, down onto the tires in front of it.
And then running across the garage.
In the garage, and this guy, the owner of the garage came up, had a shit fit. He said, "Hey, mister, get your mice out of my garage." Hey, they're your problem now. I gave him $10 or $15 for the gas, jumped in the truck and drove away. But that truck finally did die.
But there's a good story. It comes full circle because who bought the truck?
Morty Bailey.
Morty Bailey owns that truck now, and it's still in his yard, isn't it? Doesn't he use it for storage?
He
It
bought
was through last year.
It still is there. Eventually, the engine totally died. And we didn't have, the kids weren't home. we bought a trailer for just Abby and I to drive, for our horses for things. And I didn't sell it to Morty, I gave it to Morty. And it wouldn't run. So it was one of the trips, Morty came up with this big 2, 4, 6, 8, 10-wheel dump truck. And he put a long pipe between the back of his truck and the front of ours with a chain through it. And put tension on the chain. And he towed it up to his house. Well, I was steering the truck. There was no way to stop it, no brakes. And the pipe would hit the bash in the front of our truck, bash in the back of his truck. We talk about illegal, but we did it. Morty, we kept all the stalls and just got rid of them all recently. We still have the stalls. Got rid of all the aluminum hardware because somebody had my energy. It still would have made a great horse truck. But Jed took all the metal and sold it. And Morty bought it and he built shelves on it. And Morty was into rebuilding John Deere tractors. Mm-hmm. And he made that his storage truck. But it's still there. His son wants him to get rid of it. It's on a slant. It looks like it's about to roll over.
Yeah, I mean, if you drive up to Orford, if you know where Morty lives, you'll see it. Still there. But we drove it a lot. I drove it to, I took it down to Delaware. There was a vet down there that my coach wanted me to take my horse to see, and then one of his horses. We drove that truck all over the East Coast and Canada. You're right. We went to Toronto, and it was a great truck.
It was easy to drive forward. Well, actually, it was pretty easy to back up because it was one axle or one something.
Yeah, it was just one axle. Yeah.
So.
But it had, did it have, no, that one just had 5 gears, right?
It was 26 feet.
Yeah.
5 gears.
It was, the body was 26 feet and about 12 feet in front of it. It was a big truck.
It was a
and high.
big truck. But when we drove, unless it was really bad weather or the horses inside weren't behaving, we left the side doors open. So when you guys, they filled it full of horses and went to Martha's Vineyard, right? And they left the side windows open. So Sonny was right by the window. So he had his head out the whole time across on the ferry, watching the water. And yeah, I mean, it's so funny. He was just like really curious, right?
We were on a little ferry that wasn't any bigger than a truck, going from Edgartown to Chappaquiddick Island to ride out to where Kennedy had driven off the bridge. Mm. And the weight of the truck just tilted this little barge over about like that. I mean, it was well towed. And Sonny said, "This isn't right." And he put his head out and he looked down. All you could see was water. And his head went back in. And then coming home, it was about 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And Sonny, we were driving through Boston, in the area that was now 93. Yeah. And Sonny looked out and he saw all the buildings were all lit up. And he was fascinated. There was traffic, so we were creeping along. And Sonny had his head out the window, looking up at all these buildings. He'd never seen anything like it. Anyway, that truck did a lot for our family, and there are a lot of minor stories. But sometimes the brakes would give out. The engine would up, and several times the only way to get it started in reverse going down a hill. And one of the Christmas times, we did it for Christmas caroling for years, and we'd have 30, anyway, parents and children in the back. We took the stalls out, filled it full of hay, and they would sing carols, and we went house to house in mine. And one time, the engine conked out, and the only way to start it was in reverse. and I yelled at the people, hold on, and it was going backwards down the hill, and I caught the first time. And I was, can you imagine in Lyme and in the Valley News, horse truck with 35 kids and parents in it, crashes?
Oh, that was horrifying. That was horrifying.
We called it the Jolly, it was painted in 2 shades of green. We
Yeah.
called it the Jolly Green Giant.
Yeah, that was a great truck. But the first one, what I remember the most was because the second one had a roof, but the first one was open.
When it
And we-
rained,
And when it rained, we got drenched. I mean, but we would hay in it, but we could stack the hay above the sides, so it was really high. And then we would drive on Route 10, and the kids would be sitting on top of the hay, and Dad would lean out the window and yell, "Wires!" And then we would lie flat. So the wires would go over our faces. And then we'd sit up again, and then he'd yell, "Wires!" And what's so funny now, because of course now, people don't want their children sitting in the back of a pickup on the bed floor because it's dangerous. And I say, "Oh, you have no idea." Wires! And we just like flop backwards. And we hated Mengies. We actually got hay from the Mengies field and took it to our house, and that's what we did.
well, we got a lot of hay at the Paysons in Norwich.
That's right, the Paysons
And Henry was a psychiatrist who wanted to be a farmer. and I'd arrive in a truck, and Henry would have cut the hay, and it's all ready to bale, and he'll have the baler. And he was very cerebral kind of guy. And he'd start the baler, and he'd drive around the field, and the hay would just go through the baler, and he'd forgot to put the twine in. So there was one time I actually had to drive the truck up in front of him to get his attention to stop. So they could, he was not several times I got up there, I was able to run ahead of him and stop. Henry, it's not baling. Oh.
But he loved his farm.
I told that story at his funeral.
Oh, that's good. That's a
And
good story.
I made the announcement at his funeral that he was one of the most inept farmers I'd ever known. And Barbara, was his wife, now widow, was really pissed. Everybody in the church roared with laughter.
Oh, boy.
Those were the days.
I think we're
Good.
ready to go.
Well, that's
Is there
good.
Anything else you wanted to share?
No, but just remember, Mom's been stopped for going too slow
Too slow.
on the highway. How many people?
Only once.